The village of was a place of deep traditions, where the rhythms of life followed the ancient wisdom passed down through generations. Nestled between rolling hills and vast golden plains, it thrived and in the watchful eyes of the elders who ensured that every custom was upheld. The air was often filled with the scent of burning wood, the sound of cattle bells, and the distant echo of ceremonial drums that called the people together for gatherings and in the baobab tea, where stories of ancestors were told. In this village lived a young woman whose presence seemed to shine like the morning sun. She was not only beautiful, with skin rich as the earth and eyes that held the depth of 1,000 unspoken dreams, but she was also known for her kindness and wisdom. She helped the elderly fetch water from the river, guided lost children home after dark, and treated everyone with a heart so pure that even the village elders spoke highly of her. Yet, despite her goodness, she was not cherished in her own home. Father, a respected man in the village, had remarried after the death of her mother. His new wife, Nia, brought with her 2 daughters, both of whom harbored resentment and jealousy terror. And like them, she was admired by the people for her intelligence and grace. She did not scheme or gossip, nor did she seek attention. Her goodness was simply part of who she was. But to her stepmother and step-siblings, that goodness was a threat. Nia saw as competition, fearing that her daughters would always live in her shadow. What if the most powerful families in the village wished to marry instead of them? What if, despite all their efforts, would always be the one people respected? Fueled by jealousy, she made life difficult, forcing her to do endless chores while treating her own daughters like royalty. Despite the mistreatment, never complained. She accepted her hardships with quiet resilience, believing that life had a purpose for her struggles. She would wake before dawn, carrying heavy pots of water from the river, preparing meals she would never taste, and scrubbing floors until her hands were raw. But even then, she found moments of joy, watching the sunrise paint the sky, listening to the whisper of the wind through the trees, feeling the call of something greater beyond the boundaries of her village. What if she was meant for something more? The villagers watched but remained silent. Some pitied her, others whispered about the injustice, but no one dared to challenge Nia. Tradition dictated that family affairs remained private, and so suffered in silence, waiting for a day when she would finally be free. That day would come sooner than she expected. For fate had already set a path for her, when that would lead her far beyond, into the unknown lands where a hidden kingdom waited to change her destiny forever. The day began like any other. The village stirred as the morning sun stretched its golden arms over the land, warming the thatched roofs of the huts. Women were already at the river fetching water. Children chased each other between the narrow pathways, and the elders sat in quiet conversation beneath the ancient baobab tree, their voices low with wisdom. But for this was the day that would change everything. Her stepmother, Nia, had been plotting in the shadows, her envy and hatred festering like a wound left untreated. No matter how much she humiliated, the young woman never broke, never lashed out, never gave them the satisfaction of seeing her spirit crushed. This only deepened Nia's resentment. If she could not bend, she would break her. That morning, the village was thrown into turmoil. The sacred golden anklet, a symbol of prosperity and divine protection, had disappeared from the shrine. The elders, alarmed by such a theft, called for an immediate gathering. Nia, with tears in her eyes and poison on her tongue, stepped forward before the village council. "There is only one person who could have done this," she declared, her voice trembling with faint sorrow. Guests rippled through the crowd. Who had been quietly carrying a basket of millet, froze in shock. "No." She stepped forward, her voice strong despite the panic rising in her chest. I would never steal from the shrine. You all know me. You know my heart. But the village council, made out of men bound by tradition, did not question the authority of a stepmother over her stepchild. Nia wept dramatically, recounting a false tale of how she had caught sneaking into the shrine, her hands grasping the sacred anklet. She is jealous of my daughters, Nia continued, her voice dripping with malice. She wishes to curse us all with misfortune. Turned desperately to the one person she had always believed would protect her, her father. He stood among the council, his eyes downcast, his lips pressed into a firm, unyielding line. "Father," she whispered, "you know me." His silence was a knife to her heart. "Say something," she pleaded. "Tell them I would never do this." But her father, too weak to challenge his wife, did not speak. He did not look at her. The Eldens did not need further proof. In their eyes, the accusation itself was enough. To steal from the shrine was an unforgivable crime, and the punishment was clear: banishment. The decision was swift. That afternoon, the villagers gathered to watch as was cast out. There was no farewell, no sympathy, only murmurs and pitiful glances as she stood at the edge of the village, alone. Nia and her daughters smirked, triumphant. Father remained in the background, his shoulders heavy with the weight of his cowardice. No supplies were given. No one dared offer her even a drop of water for the journey ahead. With nothing but the clothes on her back, turned away from the only home she had ever known and stepped into the vast, unforgiving wilderness. Walked with no destination, only the crushing realization that she had been cast out like a stranger from the home she had known her entire life. Behind her, the familiar sounds of the village faded, the distant laughter of children, the rhythmic pounding of millet, the echoes of the Eldens' chants. Ahead of her lay the endless wild, an expanse of untamed earth, towering trees, and the unknown. The sun, once warm and golden, became a relentless force against her back, draining her strength with every state. Her bare feet, accustomed to the soft dirt paths of the village, now scraped against rocks and thorns. The wind, which once carried the voices of her people, now howled through the trees like spirits mourning her fate. Hunger gnawed at her stomach. She had not been given so much as a grain of rice or a sip of water before she was cast out. By midday, her legs trembled beneath her. She clutched her aching ribs, but there was no relief from the emptiness inside her. She had to survive. Hours passed, the sky shifting from burning blue to deep crimson as the sun prepared to set. The nights in the wild were far more terrifying than the days. As darkness crept over the land, the wilderness came alive with the glowing eyes of unseen creatures, the rustling of leaves, the distant roar of a predator. Pressed forward, her body weak but her spirit unwilling to break. Then, from the shadows, a pair of golden eyes locked onto her. She froze. A massive leopard crouched a few paces ahead, its sleek body barely visible in the dim light. Its tail flicked once. It was watching her, studying her. Heart pounded in her chest. She had no weapon, no strength to run. If this was how her life would end, she would meet it standing. The leopard took a slow step forward, then another. Then, without warning, it turned and disappeared into the trees. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Why had it spared her? Shaken but determined, pushed on. Her feet bled, her lids cracked from thirst, and the exhaustion threatened to consume her. Then she heard it. The sound of running water. Summoning the last of her strength, she followed the sound, stumbling through the thick brush until she reached a sacred river, its silver waters gleaming beneath the moonlight. The moment she fell to her knees by the river bank, something shifted in the air. The water was strangely warm, its current slow and deliberate, as though whispering to her. Cupped her hands and drank. The instant the cool water touched her lips, relief flooded through her body. It was more than just water, it was life. She could feel her strength slowly returning, her mind clearing. As she sat by the river, she noticed something peculiar. The water seemed to glow faintly, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Was it guiding her? Protecting her? She did not know. But she did know one thing. This was not the end of her journey. It was only the beginning. The journey through the wilderness had taken every ounce of strength. Days passed, though she had lost count of time, surviving on nothing but the river's water and whatever edible roots she could find. Still, she followed the river's path, its gentle currents whispering like an unseen guide leading her somewhere she did not yet understand. Then, when evening, just as the sky turned to a deep shade of violet, something changed. The air became thicker, charged with an energy that made the tiny hairs on her arms rise. The dense, unforgiving forest gave way to a clearing where the trees stood taller than any she had seen before. Their bark shimmered faintly, as if woven with threads of silver, and their leaves seemed to glow softly and in the moonlight. Stood frozen, unsure if she had wandered into a dream or another world entirely. The river that had guided her flowed gently into this new land, carving through lush green valleys and fields of flowers that shimmered in the dark. The land was alive in a way she had never seen before. Fireflies danced in mesmerizing patterns, and the very air carried a hum as if the earth itself was singing. This was no ordinary place. Pressed forward, unable to turn back now. As she moved deeper into this secret realm, she noticed something even more astonishing. Homes built into the mountainsides, woven seamlessly into nature. Bridges of vines and golden rope connected towering trees, creating a kingdom that seemed untouched by time. Then she saw them. People. They emerged from between the trees, their eyes glowing with curiosity and something else, recognition. They were unlike any villagers she had known. Their skin, deep and rich like the fertile earth, bore markings of gold and blue, and their clothes were woven from fabrics so fine they looked like the night sky itself. Before she could react, a figure stepped forward, a man with hair and eyes that seemed to pierce through her soul. "You have finally arrived." Breath caught in her throat. What did he mean? How could he have been expecting her? The man was Eldon Jabari, one of the kingdom's wisest seers. He looked at, not with suspicion, but with understanding. "You have walked a path of suffering, but fate has led you home," he said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. Opened her mouth to protest, to tell him that this was no home of hers. She was an exile, a wanderer with nowhere to belong. But before she could speak, Jabari gestured for her to follow. She was led through the heart of the kingdom, where waterfalls glowed and in the starlight and gardens thrived with plants she had never seen before. Everything about this place felt untouched by the cruelty she had known in her old village. There was no hunger, no fear, no malice, only harmony. Finally, they reached a grand structure carved into the side of a mountain. Its pillars were engraved with ancient symbols, and at the very center, seated on a throne of woven gold, was King. He was a man of imposing strength, his dark skin gleaming and in the torchlight, his robes shimmering like flowing water. His gaze was powerful yet kind, filled with wisdom that stretched beyond the years of any mortal man. Jabari spoke first. She has suffered injustice at the hands of her own people. She has been guided here by the sacred river. She is meant to be with us." Heart pounded. Why did they speak as though they had been waiting for her? King studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Tell me your story." And so, with a deep breath, did. She told him everything, the betrayal, the false accusations, the silence of her father, and the cruel exile that had nearly cost her life. She spoke of the wilderness, of the river that seemed to guide her, and the moment she stepped into this hidden kingdom. When she finished, silence filled the chamber. Then King nodded. You are home now. Her eyes widened. Home, but she had no home. Yet, as she looked around, the understanding in Jabari's gaze, the kindness in the eyes of the gathered people, the overwhelming sense of peace that filled this place, she realized something. For the first time in her life, she was somewhere she was truly wanted. Had spent so much of her life proving herself, trying to show her worth to a family that never cared, to a village that never saw her. But now, as she stood before King and the Council of Elders, she realized that this was different. Here, her worth was not assumed nor dismissed, it was hers to define. Studied her carefully, his dark eyes unreadable. Finally, he spoke. You have found our hidden kingdom, but to stay, you must prove that you are meant to be among us. Straighten her back. She had survived exile. She would survive this too. The trials of the hidden kingdom. Eldon Jabari stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of tradition. 30 trials will decide your place among us. Strength, wisdom, and compassion, only those who hold all 3 can truly belong. Nodded, determination hardening her spirit. Whatever these trials were, she would not fail. The trial of strength. At dawn, she was taken to a clearing where the warriors of the kingdom trained. They were fierce and disciplined, their movements precise, their strikes lethal. Had never been a warrior, but she had endured hardship. She had carried burdens heavier than any sword. Her task was simple yet grueling. Carry a large clay urn filled with sacred water from the river to the temple atop the mountain. The path was steep, the sun relentless, and the weight of the urn pressed down on her shoulders like her past had for so long. She stumbled, she fell, but she did not stop. Even as her arms trembled, even as the skin of her hands burned from gripping the heavy clay, she refused to be weak. By the time she reached the temple, her breath was ragged, her muscles on fire, but she had succeeded. The warriors, when skeptical of her, nodded in quiet approval. The trial of wisdom. That night was led to a grand hall filled with ancient texts and sacred scrolls. Eldon Jabari placed a single reed before her. A river gives life, but it also takes it. A mountain stands tall, but it is shaped by time. A man rules, but he is ruled by something greater. What is the force that guides all kings? Furrowed her brows, thinking. She had spent her whole life observing people, their actions, their choices, their mistakes. Fate, she answered at last. But not just fate, wisdom. The wisdom to know when to fight and when to flow like the river. When to stand firm like the mountain, but also when to change. A ruler may have power, but without wisdom he is lost. Silence. Then a smile spread across Eldon Jabari's face. She had passed. The trial of compassion. For the final test was brought to the healer's quarters, where the sick and wounded rested. A ruler is not just strong and wise. They must have a heart that seeks to heal, the healer explained. Show us what lies within your heart. Moved through the halls, tending to the ill, speaking words of comfort, applying healing balms with careful hands. It was here that she shined the brightest, not in the trials of strength or wisdom, but in her unwavering kindness. A young girl, no older than 6, clutched hand. Will you stay? She asked in a small voice. Heart ached at the question. She had nowhere else to go. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of death. She had found where she was meant to be. The prophecy, as the trials concluded, was brought before King once more. The council whispered among themselves, but the decision had already been made. Stood his expression unreadable. Then at last he spoke. Long ago, a prophecy foretold of a lost soul who would find our kingdom, someone cast away by the world, yet destined for something greater. Breath caught in her throat. You are that soul. Her journey had been one of suffering. But here she was not just surviving. She was rising. Had found peace in the hidden kingdom, but peace was never meant to last forever. One evening, as she stood by the sacred river, she overheard hushed voices among the Eldens. Their faces, usually calm, were tense with worry. Something was coming. The village in ruin. Far beyond the hidden valley, old village was unraveling. Famine had struck, the crops withering and in a relentless drought. The marketplace stood empty, and whispers of unrest spread like wildfire. Her stepmother had once stood proud, wielding power with cruelty. Now she was desperate. The village elders gathered in secret, murmuring about salvation. If the gods had turned against them, they needed to find another way to restore their fortunes. And then the whispers came. Rumors of a hidden kingdom, a place untouched by famine or suffering. A land of wealth, prosperity, and ancient power. Stepmother, along with the village leaders, made a decision. They would find this hidden kingdom, and they would claim it for themselves. The hunt begins. Guided by greed and desperation, a group of villagers set out into the wilderness. They followed old legends, seeking signs of an unseen land. Their journey was brutal. The same harsh wilderness that had nearly broken now tested them. But unlike, they were not meant to endure it. Some turned back, too weak or too afraid. Others pressed forward, driven by hunger and ambition. And then they found it. The hidden valley. The land of light beyond the trees. Dilemma. The kingdom scouts brought news of the outsiders approaching. Pest had finally come to her doorstep. As she stood before the council, she felt the weight of her choices pressing against her chest. The people who had cast her out now sought her help. King gaze was unreadable. They are your people, he said. What do you choose? Mine swirled with emotions. They had betrayed her. They had left her to die. And yet, she thought of the children in the village, starving through no fault of their own. She thought of the land she had once called home, now barren and broken. Would she allow them to suffer as they had allowed her to suffer? Or would she be better than them? As the first fires of torches flickered in the distance, signaling the arrival of the villagers at the edge of the hidden kingdom, took a deep breath. The air was thick with tension as the hidden kingdom's guards stood at the edge of the valley, their spears gleaming and in the moonlight. They had been waiting. The intruders had finally arrived. Beyond the towering trees, a group of weary travelers stumbled forward, their faces hollow with hunger, their clothes ragged from the journey. Among them was stepmother, her posture now hinged with desperation. The village elders followed behind her, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and determination. They had come to beg. The plea for salvation. Stepped forward, lifting her arms in a gesture of surrender. Please, she called out, her voice hoarse. We mean no harm. The guards did not lower their weapons. One of the elders, a man recognized from her childhood, took a shaky step forward. We are from a village that is suffering, he said. Our land has turned against us. Our crops fail, our wells dry. We have heard whispers of a kingdom that thrives in secret. We seek only mercy. The warriors exchanged glances. They knew who these people were. They knew what they had done. A figure emerged from the shadows. The guests were almost instant. Eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She had come expecting to face a faceless ruler, a stranger. Instead, she had come face to face with the girl she had cast away. The weight of the past stood tall, her presence commanding. She was no longer the frightened girl forced into exile. She was no longer the helpless stepdaughter they had tormented. Stumbled back, shaking her head in disbelief. You. One of the Eldens clutched his chest. But how? The village had believed she was dead. And yet, here she stood, dressed in the rich, flowing robes of the hidden kingdom. A woman of status. A woman of power. Dropped to her knees, her voice cracking. My child, please. Jotaitan, my child. The words ran hollow. Where had this motherly concern been when she had begged for mercy back in the village? The other Eldens followed lead, lowering themselves onto the ground. Pride no longer mattered. Only survival did. We are sorry, one of them muttered. We wronged you. Took a slow breath, her heart pounding. Was this true regret? Or simply desperation? The chose before her. From behind her, a deep voice spoke. What shall we do with them? King. He stood beside her, legal and composed, his gaze unwavering. They come seeking aid, he said, but their fates rest in your hands. The weight of his words pressed down on her. Revenge or mercy. She looked at the people who had once cast her aside, who had deemed her unworthy. Now they begged for her kindness. For the first time, held power over them. A hush fell over the gathering. All eyes were on. The people who had once banished her now kneeled before her, pleading for mercy. The power to decide their fate rested in her hands. King stood beside her, silent but watchful. He had seen the way of rulers before her, those who let vengeance blind them, those who mistook punishment for justice. But was different. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had dreamed of this moment once, a time when her stepmother and the Eldens would realize their mistake, when they would suffer as she had suffered. But now that it was here, revenge did not taste as sweet as she had imagined. The path of wisdom lifted her chin, her voice calm but firm. You were cruel to me, she said. You cast me away without proof, without compassion. You left me to die. And the Eldens flinched at her words, guilt clouding their faces. But I did not die. Gaze swept across the kneeling figures. I found something greater. A place where I am valued, where wisdom and kindness shape leadership, not fear and selfishness. She paused. And now you come begging for that same kindness. A murmur rippled through the hidden kingdom's people. They had suffered before, exiled from the world, forgotten because of past betrayals. Many believed these outsiders deserved the same fate. But so beyond vengeance. If I cast you away as you did to me, what would that make me? She asked. Lips trembled. Please. The Eldens bowed their heads, ashamed. A just punishment. Turn to King. They do not deserve distraction, but they must learn. The king nodded, intrigued. What do you propose? She thought for a moment. They must rebuild their village with their own hands, with no exploitation or greed. They will no longer rule by fear, but by fairness. And they will no longer see themselves as above others. One of the Eldens hesitated. But how will we survive? Expression did not waver. You will learn to thrive without taking from others. You will trade fairly. You will work for your prosperity. And you will remember the cost of cruelty. The hidden kingdom's people murmured in approval. This was true justice, not revenge, but a lesson. A new balance. King smiled, pride in his gaze. You have a wise heart. She turned to the village elders. You may return to your home, but end in one condition. Voice was barely above a whisper. Anything. The kingdom will remain hidden. You will not speak of this place. Not out of fear, but out of respect. It is not yours to take. The elders nodded quickly. They understood. Had spared them, but she had also reshaped them. True strength lies in mercy. As the elders and left the hidden kingdom, watched them go, feeling something unexpected, peace. Revenge could have been easy, but forgiveness took strength. She had proven not just to them, but to herself, that true power was not in distraction, but in wisdom and understanding. A hush fell over the kingdom as King turned to face. His deep, knowing gaze held an unspoken truth, when that had been waiting to be revealed. He said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. You have shown wisdom beyond your years, strength beyond hardship, and kindness beyond betrayal. This kingdom has long awaited a leader like you. The gathered people murmured in agreement. They had watched, grow, had seen her endure trials that would have broken many. Yet she had risen above them all, not with vengeance, but with justice. Rule beside me, continued, not as a queen by title alone, but as an equal. As a ruler destined to guide this kingdom into a future of prosperity and fairness. A moment of reflection. Heart pounded. She had spent her life being treated as lesser, as an outcast. Now she was being offered a throne, a place of honor, not because of birthright, but because of her actions. She looked at the people before her. They were not like the ones in her old village. They had embraced her, trusted her, and given her a chance when no one else had. For so long, she had wondered why fate had been so cruel to her. But now she saw it clearly. Everything had led her to this moment. She took a deep breath and met eyes. I accept. A cheer erupted through the kingdom. The drums, silent for so long, boomed with the rhythm of celebration. From exile to queen, the coronation was like nothing had ever seen. Lanterns lit up the sky, their golden glow reflecting of the sacred river that had guided her here. Dancers moved in harmony, and the sound of joyful singing filled the air. Draped in royal robes woven with the finest silk, stood beside King as he placed the ceremonial crown upon her head. No longer the girl cast out into the wilderness. No longer the servant to those who had despised her. She was queen of the hidden kingdom. A new era begins. As the celebrations continued, turned her gaze toward the horizon. The past no longer held her captive. The future was hers to shape. She had not been banished to suffer. She had been guided to her through destiny. And now she would rule not with fear, but with wisdom. Not with power alone, but with a heart that had known both pain and triumph. This was not just the rise of a queen. This was the beginning of a legend. The moral of the story: fate finds those who deserve it. In the heart of every tale passed down through generations, there lies a truth waiting to be understood. Journey was never about loss, it was about discovery. She had once believed that exile was her end, that being cast out from her village had stripped her of all she had. But fate had other plans. It is often in the darkest moments that the path to destiny reveals itself. What seems like suffering is sometimes a taste, a journey that leads to where one truly belongs. Was never meant to stay in a place that failed to see her worth. She was never meant to remain in the shadows of those who sought to dim her light. The world had simply been waiting for the right moment to show her where she was truly meant to be. The truth about worth. A person's value is not determined by the way others treat them. True worth cannot be erased by cruelty, nor can it be buried by lies. Stepmother and the villain Eldons believed they had taken everything from her. They thought they had silenced her, reduced her to nothing. But the truth is, worth is not something that can be given or taken away. It is something that lives within. No matter how hard others try to diminish it, it will always shine through. The consequences of cruelty. For those who act with selfishness and deceit, the universe finds a way to restore balance. Stepmother and the village leaders believed they could cast her aside and continue with their lives and change. But fate is not blind. It remembers and it corrects. They found themselves lost and desperate, forced to seek help from the very person they had betrayed. Their actions came full circle, teaching them a lesson they never expected. Cruelty may bring temporary victory, but in the end, justice always prevails. Exile was not the end, it was the beginning. What seemed like greatest misfortune became her greatest blessing. Had she remained in the village, she would never have discovered the hidden kingdom. She would never have learned who she truly was. She would never have become the queen she was always meant to be. Fate does not always reveal itself in ways we expect. Sometimes it comes disguised as loss, hardship, or even betrayal. But those who continue forward with courage and kindness will always find their way. Study is proof that being cast out does not mean being forgotten. It means being set free. And for those who hold on to their strength and integrity, fate will always lead them to the life they were meant to live.